That kind of sounds good to me.
Gimel base. If one spills water in a public domain and someone else is injured by it, he is liable for his injury. If one hides thorns of glass, or if one makes fence of thorns or a fence that fell into a public domain and others are injured by them, he is liable for the injury. If one puts out straw or stubble into a public domain to become fertilizer and someone else is injured by it, he is liable for his injury. And whoever sees it first acquires it. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says all who litter the public domain and cause damage are liable to pay, and whoever seizes them first acquires them. If one turns over dung in a public domain and someone else is injured by it, he is liable for his injury. If two potters were walking and one after the other, and the first one stumbled and fell, and the second one stumbled over the first one is liable for the injuries of the second one. Okay.
So similar stories of people colliding in the Rishus Harabim. Zeh Bava Chaviso, Zeh Bava Koraso. So you got two guys. One is carrying a pot, and the other one's carrying a beam. Okay, Mishna Kadosh Shel Zeh B'Koraso Shel Zeh. So they're walking towards each other, and something happened, and the beam crashed into the pot. Well, the guy who did the pot, who's holding the beam, is Pater. They both have got permission to walk in the Rishus Harabim, and the guy with the pot must be careful of guys walking around with beams. And since they're both looking at each other, it's he can see what damage is coming, and therefore he has the responsibility to look after his stuff. But what happens if they're walking one behind the other? So the guy with the beam is walking first, and the guy with the pot is walking behind him. And the guy with the pot walks into the guy with the beam. Okay, too bad. Patur balakora, he doesn't have to pay. He didn't do anything. He's got permission to use the Rishus Harabim as much as the guy with the pot. Amad balakora, however, if they were walking together and then the guy with the beams suddenly decided, I need to adjust my load, it's slipping or whatever, so he stops to try and do his load, and he doesn't. And the guy who's walking behind him crashes into him because he stopped suddenly. Then we say he's fine. Okay, because now he didn't give fair notice to anyone behind him that he was stopping. It's kind of like if you're driving and you want to stop, you should put your signals on to say, hey, I'm pulling over. Okay, but if he tells if he calls out, hey, I'm stopping, and the guy didn't listen, okay, that's his problem again. So if he gives fair notice, or what he really should do is sort of pull over to the side, like walk gently over to the side to adjust his load. Okay, and in the reverse position, so let's say the guy with the pot is walking first and the guy with the beam is walking behind him. So if the pot gets broken by the beam, then the guy who's walking with the beam and walked too fast, he's chayav because he walked into him. But if the guy with the pot suddenly stopped and the guy with the beam crashed into him, patur, he doesn't have to pay because the guy who was adjusting his load should have said so. But if he did give fair warning, then chayav. So it's so that all the positions get reversed, because that if the guy in the front gave fair notice and the guy behind, it's his fault. And the same thing goes when you have one person with a candle and one person carrying a bundle of flax. Okay, the guy with the candle has got a mazik in his hands, and he could set fire to the other person's load. 10. Mishna Vav. Shnayim shehu mahalchim b'Rishus Harabim. So you got two guys who are walking in the Rishus Harabim. Echad ratz ve'echad mahalech. So one is running and the other one is just walking. Or shehayu shneim ratzim, or both of them are running. And they crashed into each other and caused damages. Shneim paturim. And they're both patur. Now, why is this? We say that the Gemara explains that this Mishnah Vav is speaking particularly in the case of Erev Shabbos or Erev Yom Tov, where people are rushing. Okay, and it's expected that if you're in the Rishus Harabim, there are going to be people running to get stuff done. So therefore, once it's an expected thing, that's a normal usage of the Rishus Harabim, and therefore both of them are using the Rishus Harabim in the normal way, and neither has got any claim on the other. Because if you're in the Rishus Harabim, you've just got to take into account the fact that people are running, and if somebody crashes into you, it's your fault for not watching out. Okay, but if it was a regular weekday, the Gemara explains, if this was a regular weekday and one person was walking and the other person was running, and they crashed into each other, then the guy who was running is liable for damages, because generally on a normal weekday, people shouldn't be running in the Rishus Harabim, and therefore he's liable for any damage that he causes. This is, by the way, we spoke about Adam Muad Lolam. This is we're going into detail here about the fact that a person is always considered Muad. He doesn't have to get a warning. You're Muad all the time. And the same thing applies in Mishna Zayin. So a guy's chopping wood. He's in his backyard. He's entitled to chop wood in his backyard. But a chip flew out and caused some damage to something in the Rishus Harabim next to his house. Or he's Rishus Harabim, or he's chopping wood in the Rishus Harabim, and it flew out into Rishus Yachid. Or even if he's chopping in his yard and a chip flies out into the neighbor's yard and causes damage there. Chayav. 100% chayav nezek shalem, because Adam muad leolam, if a person's chopping wood, he's got to be careful that he doesn't send chips flying, because that's what happens. Right? And I mean, that's actually kind of the classic case of the person who's chayav galos, when he's chopping wood and a chip flies out and kills somebody.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
That's he's chayav galos for that. So the Torah shows you that there's that you've got to be careful of what damages you might do unintentionally.
That's the example the Gemara uses. Then they send them off to Miglat.
Yeah. Okay. Kiddushin. Okay.
From the altar and upward is not investigated, nor from the platform and upward, nor from the Sanhedrin and upward. Anyone whose ancestors were known to have been from the public officials or from the charity collectors may marry off their daughters to a Kohen. It is not necessary to investigate these descent. Your Roshi says also one who signed as a witness in the court of Yisnaya near Sephoros. The Kanana ben Antigo says also one who was listed in the king's army. The daughter of a male child is disqualified from marrying a Kohen forever. If a Kohen married a Kalala, his daughter is qualified to marry a Kohen. If a Kalal married the daughter of a Kohen, his daughter is disqualified from marrying a Kohen. Rabbi Yehuda says the daughter of a male proselyte is like the daughter of a male Kalal. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says if a non-Kohen married a proselyte, his daughter is qualified to marry a Kohen. If a proselyte married the daughter of a regular Jew, his daughter is qualified to marry a Kohen. However, if a proselyte married a proselyte, his daughter is disqualified from marrying a Kohen. This applies to both the proselyte and freedman, even until 10 generations, unless his mother is of Jewish descent. Rabbi Yossi says even if a proselyte married a proselyte, his daughter is qualified to marry a Kohen. Okay.
Yeah.
One more, right?
No,
you're getting. I keep
base.
all the time. Okay, get to. Okay, dollar base. Originally, he would convene a court elsewhere and nullify it. Rav Gamil, the elder, decreed that they should not do this for the sake of the general good. Originally, he would change his name and her name and the name of his town and the name of her town. Rabbi Gamil, the elder, decreed that he write the man so-and-so in any name he has, the woman so-and-so in any name she has for the sake of the general good. A widow is not paid for the property of orphans except with an oath, and they ceased from imposing an oath upon her. So Rabbi Gamil, the elder, decreed that he should make a letter prohibiting whatever the orphans wish and collect a ketubah. Witnesses sign on a get for the sake of the general good, and Hillel decreed the prose bill for the sake of the general good. A slave who was taken captive, and they redeemed him. If to be a slave, he shall be subjugated. If to be a free man, he shall not be subjugated. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, in either case, he shall be subjugated. A slave whose master designated him as a payment for a debt to another and then freed him, by right of law, the slave should not be liable at all, but for the sake of the general good. They compel his master to free him. and he writes a bond for his value, and Rabbi Shimon Gamaliel says he does not write only the one who freed him. Right? Okay.
Okay. Teshuva, Tesvav.
Okay, test Vav. If she went from her husband's babe to her father's house, or if she went back to her father-in-law's house, but was not made an administrator, the heirs cannot impose an oath on her. If she became an administrator, the heirs can impose an oath on her concerning her future, but they cannot impose an oath concerning her past. If a woman impairs a ketubah, she is not paid, except with an oath. If one witness testifies against her that it is paid, she is not paid, except for with an oath. From property of orphans, from assigned property or his absence, she is not paid, except with an oath. If she impairs a ketubah, how? If her ketubah was 1,000 zuz, and he said to her, "You have received a ketubah," and she says, "I received only 100," she's not paid except with an oath. If one witness testifies against her that it is paid, how? If her ketubah was 1,000 zuz, and he said to her, "You have received your ketubah," and she said, "I have not received it," and one witness testifies against her that it is paid, she is not paid except with an oath. From assigned property, how? If he sold his property to others and she seeks to be paid by the purchasers, she is not paid except with an oath. From the property of orphans, how? If he died and left his property to orphans and she seeks to be paid by the orphans, she is not paid except with an oath. Or in his absence, how? If he went overseas and she seeks to be paid with his absence, she is not paid except with an oath. And Reb Shimon says, whenever she claims a ketubah, her heirs can impose an oath upon her. But if she does not claim a ketubah, the heirs cannot impose an oath upon her.
Hey, Erevin. Hey, Dalet.
We may not measure except for a 50 cubit rope, either shorter nor longer. We may not measure except with the rope opposite his heart. If he was measuring and reached a valley or a mound, he should span it and return his measuring. If he reached a mountain, he should span it and return to his measuring, provided he does not go out of the tachum. If he is unable to span it, regarding this, Reb Dosha Ben Yanai says in Reb Meir's name, I have heard that we pierce mountains.
Well, so what they do is that's where they have this thing where they climb up and have it at the angle. So one holding it at shoulder level, the other one's holding it at foot level or whatever.
Right. We may not accept measurements except from an expert. If he extended the takum at one point and shortened it at another, the extended takum is followed. If one extended it while another shortened it, the one who extended it is followed. Even a male slave, even a female slave is believed to say, until here is the Sabbath tachum, for the sages did not state this law to be stringent, but rather to be lenient. If a town of an individual became public property, we make an error for its entirety. But if a public town became an individual's, we may not make it an error for its entirety, unless we include an area that is equivalent to the town of Hadasha in Judea, which has 50 inhabitants. These are the words of Reb Yehuda. Reb Shimon says the courtyards containing 2 dwellings. And okay, Zion. If one emerged there in a bed, even though its feet were sunken into thick mud, it becomes tahor because the water comes first. Regarding a mikvah of shallow water, one can depress therein even bundles of wood or bundles of reeds so that the water rises, and one can then go down and immerse himself. If a needle was placed on the steps of a cave and one moved the water to and fro, as soon as the water passes over it, it becomes tahor.
Which is the correct way to be matahir a needle, is you put it on the step and let the water come and wash over it.
Right. The land of Israel is tahor, and its mikvahs are tahor. Mikvahs of Gentiles made outside the land are valid for Balkari, even if they were filled by a canal. Those in the land of Israel outside the town gate and valid for even nidos. Those within the town gate are valid for Balkari, but are invalid for all others who are tameh. Reb Eliezer says those near a town or a road are deemed tameh because of washing clothes therein, and those distant are deemed tahor. The following Balkari require tefillah. If one saw a dribbling fluid or an opaque fluid at the beginning, he's tahor. In the middle or at the end, he's tameh. From the beginning till the end, he is tahor. If it was white and stringy, he is tameh, and Reb Yossi says white is like opaque. One discharge thick drops from the milk.
We've done 3.
Sorry.
And chulin.
Chulin. Okay. Chulin, Rov Zion. What may we cover and what we may not cover? We may cover from fine dung or fine sand with lime or with potsherds or with a brick or with the cover of a cast that were crushed. But we may not cover with the coarse dung, with coarse sand, or with a brick or with the cover of a cast that was not crushed. Neither may he invert a vessel over it. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel stated as general rule, whatever makes plants grow may be used for covering, but what does not make plants grow may not be used for covering.
So how fine does it have to be for kisoy adam? If it's something that's of the sort of consistency that a plant could take root in, then you can use it. But if it's too coarse for a plant to take root, you can't use it for kisoy adam.
The prohibition against eating the sinew of the thigh applies both in the land and outside of the land. When the temple exists and when the temple does not exist, to unconsecrated animals and to consecrated ones, and it applies to an animal and to a beast, to the right thigh and to the left thigh, but it does not apply to a fowl because it has no spoon-shaped hip. And it applies to a fetus. Rabbi Yehuda says it does not apply to a fetus, and its fat is permissible. Butchers are not believed concerning the sinew of the thigh, and these are the words of Reb Meir, but they can come and say they are believed concerning it and concerning fat. One may send a Gentile a thigh with the sinew of a thigh inside because its place is discernible. And one who removed the sinew of the thigh must remove it entirely. Reb Yehuda says enough to fulfill with the mitzvah of removal.
Okay.
If one eats,
Done.
that was 3? Oh.
That was 3. Yeah.
I remember, by the way, that I have a Friday. I know you sometimes have it late. I have a doctor's appointment at 9.